Blood trickled down Jasmine's small face as she clutched her backpack. The thunder of motorcycles grew louder. 6 massive bikes surrounded her engines, rumbling. The lead rider removed his helmet, revealing a scarred face. "Nobody touches our princess again," he growled, staring at the school entrance. Before we dive into this incredible story of courage and justice, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this kind of story about standing up against racism moves, you hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of communities coming together. Now let's rewind to see how this brave little girl and her unlikely protectors changed an entire town. 7-year-old Jasmine Taylor was not your average first grader. With wide, curious brown eyes that sparkled when she talked about science and a brilliant mind that could solve math problems meant for children twice her age, she should have been thriving at Westfield Elementary. Located in the affluent Connecticut suburb of Westfield, the school boasted top test scores, modern facilities, and a reputation for excellence that attracted families from neighboring towns. But for Jasmine, the gleaming hallways and colorful classrooms had become a battleground where she fought daily just to survive. As one of only 3 black students in the entire elementary school, Jasmine stood out in the predominantly white community. Her father, Marcus Taylor, had moved them to Westfield 6 months earlier, after accepting a position as a nurse at the local hospital. A single father at 34, Marcus worked double shifts to afford their modest home in the expensive district, believing the sacrifice worth it for the educational opportunities it would provide his daughter. "You're going to soar here, Jazzy," he had promised on her first day, straightening her neatly pressed uniform and adjusting her braids with their colorful beads. "Just be yourself and everyone will see how amazing you are." But that promise had quickly unraveled. The torment began subtly enough, 3 older students accidentally knocking her lunch tray to the floor, whispers that fell silent when she approached, being the last one picked for teams in physical education. By the second week, the attacks had become more direct. "Your kind doesn't belong at our school," sneered Trevor Collins, a 4th grader whose father sat on the town council. His friends laughed as they stole her science textbook and played keep away with it in the hallway. When Jasmine reported the incident to her teacher, Mrs. Holloway, a thin-lipped woman in her 50s with perpetually pursed lips, the response had been dismissive. "Boys will be boys, dear. Perhaps if you didn't make yourself such an obvious target." Each morning, Jasmine's stomach knotted tighter as Marcus dropped her at the entrance before rushing to his early hospital shift. The colorful beads that had once adorned her braids were now gone, removed after students had pulled them painfully from her hair, scattering them across the bathroom floor while calling her names too horrible to repeat. "Why don't you go back where you came from?" they had taunted, though Jasmine had been born just 40 miles away in Hartford. The racial slurs grew more frequent, whispered in hallways or scrawled on notes slipped into her desk. When she found her backpack and toilet books ruined and homework destroyed, Jasmine had finally broken down and told her father everything. Marcus Taylor was not a confrontational man, but seeing his daughter's tears had ignited something fierce within him. The next morning, he had requested time off work and marched into Principal Walter Branson's office, a folder of documented incidents clutched in his hand. Principal Branson, a tall man with thinning blonde hair and an expensive suit, had listened with practiced patience, hands steepled beneath his chin. "Mr. Taylor," he had said when Marcus finished, "children can be cruel sometimes. It's part of growing up. I'm sure Jasmine is having trouble adjusting to our community, but I assure you we don't have a racism problem at Westfield Elementary." "These aren't childish pranks." Marcus had insisted, his voice rising despite his efforts to remain calm. "My daughter is being targeted because of her race. Look at these incidents I've documented, 10 separate events in just the past month." Principal Branson's smile never reached his eyes. "Perhaps Jasmine is being a bit sensitive. The Collins boy you mentioned comes from one of our most respected families. His father contributes significantly to our school programs." The implication was clear, and Marcus felt his heart sink. Money and influence mattered more than his daughter's well-being. The breaking point came during the spring science fair. Jasmine had spent weeks perfecting her project on solar energy, creating a miniature house with functioning solar panels that powered tiny LED lights. Marcus had helped her order parts and stayed up late many nights as she perfected her design. The morning of the fair, Jasmine had carefully transported her project to school, eyes bright with excitement. Mrs. Holloway said, "I might even qualify for the regional competition," she told her father. But during lunch period, Trevor and his friends had found the project unattended in the classroom. When Jasmine returned, her creation lay in pieces, the solar panels' smashed wires torn apart, and her carefully handwritten presentation board defaced with crude drawings and racial epithets. Mrs. Holloway had found her sobbing amidst the wreckage. "There's no proof who did this," she had said with a sigh. "And you've missed the submission deadline now. I'll have to give you an incomplete grade." That night, Jasmine had her first nightmare, waking up screaming, convinced someone was chasing her through school hallways. Marcus held her until she fell back asleep, his shirt damp with her tears. After that, getting her to school became a daily battle. "My stomach hurts," she would say each morning. "I think I'm sick." Her grades, once stellar, began to slip. The bright, curious child who had loved learning was disappearing before Marcus's eyes, replaced by a withdrawn, fearful girl who jumped at loud noises and avoided eye contact. The bathroom became Jasmine's sanctuary at school, the only place she could escape her tormentors, if only for a few minutes. She would lock herself in a stall during lunch periods, pulling her feet up so no one would know she was there, writing in the journal her father had given her. "I wish I could disappear," she wrote one day, tears blurring the ink. "I wish I was invisible so no one could see me and hurt me anymore." It was on her way home, trudging along the sidewalk with her eyes fixed on the ground, that Jasmine first noticed them. Stopped at a traffic light at the intersection near school were 5 motorcycles, their engines rumbling like distant thunder. The riders were intimidating figures in leather vests, helmets obscuring their faces. But what caught her attention was a small detail on the back of one bike, a worn teddy bear keychain incongruously gentle against the machine's powerful frame. As the light changed and the motorcycles roared away, Jasmine found herself watching until they disappeared around a corner. For the first time in weeks, something had pierced through her cloud of misery, curiosity about these strange, powerful figures who seemed so free, so unafraid of anything. Little did she know how significant that chance encounter would become. The incidents at school continued to escalate with frightening speed. What had begun as verbal taunts and destroyed property now involved physical intimidation. Trevor Collins and his growing group of followers seemed emboldened by the lack of consequences, their actions becoming increasingly brazen. One Tuesday afternoon, Jasmine was cornered in the empty art room after class. "Let's see how much prettier we can make you," Trevor sneered, uncapping a permanent marker while 2 other boys blocked the door. By the time Jasmine escaped, her arms were covered in crude drawings and slurs. She wore long sleeves for a week, despite the warm spring weather, too ashamed to show her father what had happened. The worst incident occurred on a rainy Thursday when Jasmine was finishing a makeup assignment in the library. Taking a different route back to her classroom to avoid Trevor's usual hangout spots, she passed the janitor's supply closet. Strong hands suddenly shoved her from behind, sending her stumbling into the dark space. The door slammed shut, followed by the distinctive click of a lock. "Enjoy your new classroom, jungle girl," came Trevor's mocking voice through the door, followed by receding laughter. Jasmine spent 3 terrifying hours trapped in that closet, surrounded by chemical smells and darkness, her cries for help unheard in the little used hallway. The janitor arriving for his afternoon cleaning had been shocked to find the sobbing child huddled among mops and cleaning supplies. "I don't know how the door got locked," Principal Branson told Marcus that evening, his expression concerned but eyes cold. "Children play pranks. We can't watch every student every minute of the day." Marcus Taylor was reaching his breaking point. That night, after finally getting Jasmine to sleep, he researched homeschooling options online. The reality was crushing. He couldn't afford to quit his job or even reduce his hours to teach Jasmine himself. As a single parent working overtime to keep them afloat in the expensive community, homeschooling was financially impossible. Transferring to another district meant selling their house at a loss and disrupting the stability he'd worked so hard to create. The following morning, Marcus requested an emergency meeting with Superintendent Gloria Phillips, bypassing Principal Branson entirely. He arrived at the district offices with a folder containing photographs, incident reports, and a timeline of events. Superintendent Phillips, a thin woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun, listened without expression as Marcus detailed the ongoing harassment. When he finished expecting outrage, or at least concern, her response left him speechless. "Mr. Taylor," she said, adjusting her glasses, "while these incidents are unfortunate, perhaps we need to consider whether Jasmine is truly the right fit for Westfield. Some children have trouble adjusting to high-achievement environments. Maybe Jasmine should work harder at making friends and fitting into our community culture." The implication was unmistakable. The problem wasn't the harassment. The problem was Jasmine's blackness in a white community. As Marcus sat in stunned silence, Superintendent Phillips continued, "We've had very few complaints of this nature in our district. Westfield Elementary has an exemplary reputation." Later that day, through careful questioning of a sympathetic secretary in the district office, Marcus discovered this was a lie. There had been at least 6 formal discrimination complaints in the past 3 years, all from minority families. All had been quietly resolved when the families mysteriously withdrew their children and moved away, often after receiving confidential settlements that came with non-disclosure agreements. Jasmine's only refuge at school had become the library, where Mrs. Washington, an older black woman with kind eyes and a steel spine, kept watch over her domain like a protective hawk. "You come here any time you need, child," she had told Jasmine after finding her hiding behind the reference section one lunch period. "This is a safe space." It was in the library, using a computer partially hidden by bookshelves, that Jasmine began researching motorcycle clubs one afternoon. The memory of those powerful bikes and their riders had stayed with her, representing a strength and freedom she desperately craved. Most search results warned about dangerous gangs and criminal activities, but then she found something different. The Road Warriors MC, based right in Westfield, had a simple website showing group rides for charity toy drives, for children's hospitals and community service projects. There were photos of diverse members standing proudly beside their bikes, including one with a teddy bear keychain, the same one Jasmine had spotted that day. With trembling fingers, she jotted down the address of their clubhouse, located in an industrial area at the edge of town. For 3 days, Jasmine carried that slip of paper in her pocket, taking it out occasionally to stare at the address, her mind filled with impossible scenarios. Could these intimidating adults actually help when everyone else had failed her? The idea was terrifying, but also strangely compelling. After another brutal day when Trevor and his friends had dumped her lunch tray and shoved her against a wall, leaving a bruise on her shoulder, Jasmine made her decision. Instead of taking her usual route home, she set off toward the industrial district, her heart pounding with each step. The walk took nearly 45 minutes, leading her through unfamiliar parts of town where warehouses and repair shops replaced manicured lawns and luxury cars. Several times she nearly turned back, fear nearly overwhelming her determination. The clubhouse wasn't what she expected. Rather than some frightening compound, it was a converted garage with a simple sign bearing their logo, a shield with wings. Several motorcycles were parked outside, and the sound of music and laughter drifted through the open door. Jasmine stood across the street, frozen with indecision. What would her father think? What if these people were dangerous? What if they just laughed at her problems? As she was about to lose her nerve and flee, the door opened, and a massive figure appeared. He looked directly at her as though sensing her presence. After a moment's hesitation, he raised a hand in a small wave. That simple, non-threatening gesture decided her. Clutching her backpack strapped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Jasmine took a deep breath and crossed the street toward the clubhouse, toward what would either be a terrible mistake or the beginning of salvation. Conversation stopped abruptly as Jasmine stepped through the doorway of the Road Warriors clubhouse. 6 pairs of eyes turned toward her, expressions shifting from surprise to concern as they took in the small figure with a bruised face and terrified eyes standing before them. The clubhouse interior was unexpected. A spacious room with comfortable furniture, a pool table, a small kitchen area, and walls covered with photographs of group rides and charity events. The smell of coffee and motor oil hung in the air. "Well now," said a deep voice breaking the silence. "Looks like we have a visitor." The man who stepped forward made Jasmine take an involuntary step back. Standing at least 6 feet 4 inches tall with broad shoulders and powerful arms, he had dark skin, a shade deeper than her own, and a face marked by a jagged scar running from his right temple to his jaw. Despite his intimidating appearance, his eyes were kind as he crouched down to her level. "I'm Ray. Some folks call me Thunder. What's your name?" Young Lady Jasmine swallowed hard, finding her voice. "I'm Jasmine Taylor. I'm 7 years old and I need help." The tremble in her voice betrayed the courage it had taken to come here. Ray nodded seriously, as though small children appearing at their clubhouse seeking assistance was perfectly normal. "All right, Jasmine Taylor. Why don't you come sit down and tell us what kind of help you need?" He gestured toward a worn leather couch. As Ray led her to the seating area, other members of the club came into clearer focus. A muscular Latino man with tattoos covering his arms was watching her with undisguised concern. Beside him stood a slender Asian woman in her 30s, her expression analytical as she studied Jasmine's visible bruises. A middle-aged white man with a full beard and gentle eyes pulled up a chair, while 2 other members, a black woman with elaborate braids and a younger white man with red hair, moved closer to listen. "This is some of our club," Ray explained. "That's Victor Hammer Rodriguez, our mechanic. The lady giving you the once-over is Dr. Sarah Chen. We call her Lightning. She works in the emergency room. The big guy with the beard is Mike Johnson Bear to us. He was a teacher before joining our ranks. Over there is Tanya Sparks Williams and Kevin Red O'Malley." Each member nodded or waved as they were introduced. "We're the Road Warriors," Ray continued. "But I'm guessing you already knew that since you found your way here." He sat across from her, his massive frame dwarfing the chair. "Now what's got you so scared that you'd come looking for a bunch of bikers?" The kindness in his voice unlocked something in Jasmine. Words poured out as she described the daily torment at Westfield Elementary, the racial slurs, the destroyed projects, the physical intimidation being locked in the janitor's closet. She explained how the teachers ignored her pleas for help, how the principal dismissed her father's concerns, how the superintendent suggested she was the problem. As she spoke, she noticed the expressions of the bikers' darkening hands, clenching jaws, tightening. When she finally fell silent, the room was quiet enough to hear the distant rumble of traffic. Ray stood up and walked to a window, his back to the room. When he turned around, his face was composed, but something smoldered in his eyes. 20 years ago, he said quietly, "I had a daughter. Her name was Aaliyah. She was beautiful, smart, and brave, just like you." The past tense wasn't lost on Jasmine. "We lived in a town not so different from Westfield. She was the only black girl in her high school. The things that happened to her." He paused, collecting himself. "I was deployed overseas with the Marines. Her mother was working 2 jobs. We didn't see how bad it had gotten until it was too late." His voice dropped even lower. "Aaliyah was 16 when she hung herself in her bedroom. The note she left said she couldn't take being hated for her skin color anymore." The clubhouse was utterly silent. Sarah Lightning Chen had moved to sit beside Jasmine, her hand now resting supportively on the girl's shoulder. Ray Mike Bear Johnson said carefully, "We need to think about this. There are legal implications. We can't just march into an elementary school." "Legal implications." Ray's voice was deadly quiet. "This child is being terrorized while adults who should protect her look the other way." "What are the legal implications of that?" Victor Hammer Rodriguez stood up. "Bear's right that we need a plan, but he's not saying we shouldn't help. We all agree on that." He looked around the room, receiving nods of confirmation. "But we need to be smart about this. Tactical." The former Marine in Ray responded to the word. "Tactical. Yes. Reconnaissance first. Document everything. Identify the key players." He turned to Jasmine. "Does your father know you're here?" When she shook her head, he sighed. "We need to get you home. He must be worried sick. And we need his permission before we can help you." The solution they developed over the next hour was simple in concept but complex in execution. The road warriors would provide escort service for Jasmine to and from school. They would document any incidents of harassment through photography and recording. They would maintain a visible but legal presence near the school, always on public property, always within the bounds of the law. Your father still might not approve, Ray warned, as they prepared to take Jasmine home. Many parents would be concerned about their child associating with bikers. Jasmine's journey home was very different from her solitary walk to the clubhouse. She rode on the back of Ray's motorcycle, wearing a small helmet the club kept for members' children, while the others formed a protective formation around them. The sight that greeted Marcus Taylor when he arrived home from his hospital shift was one he would never forget: his daughter dismounting from an enormous motorcycle surrounded by leather-clad bikers in his driveway. His reaction was exactly what Ray had predicted: explosive fear, anger, and disbelief. "Have you lost your mind?" he shouted, pulling Jasmine behind him protectively. "What are you people doing with my daughter?" The confrontation might have escalated if Sarah Chen hadn't stepped forward, her hospital ID badge visible. "Mr. Taylor, I'm Dr. Chen from Memorial Hospital. We sometimes work the same shifts, though, in different departments. Your daughter came to us because she's being brutalized at school, and no one is protecting her." Her professional demeanor seemed to penetrate Marcus's panic. "Please just hear what we have to propose." Inside the Taylor home, Ray shared his personal tragedy with Marcus, his voice breaking as he described finding his daughter's body. "I can't bring Aaliyah back," he said, "but maybe I can keep history from repeating itself with Jasmine." Over coffee and skepticism, Marcus listened to their proposal. His initial refusal gradually softened as he realized these intimidating strangers genuinely cared about his daughter's welfare. "Let me sleep on it," he finally said. This is a lot to process. But Jasmine could see in his eyes that he was considering it, that for the first time in months, he was seeing a possible solution. The next morning, 6 motorcycles rumbled to a stop in front of the Taylor house. Neighbors peeked through curtains as Jasmine emerged wearing a bright yellow helmet, her father watching anxiously from the porch. Ray helped her onto his bike, and the unusual procession set off toward Westfield Elementary. As they approached the school, students and parents stopped to stare at the unexpected sight. When they reached the drop-off zone, Ray removed his helmet and locked eyes with Principal Branson, who had hurried outside at the commotion. No words were exchanged, but a message was clearly delivered. This child was now under protection. So I have a question for you watching this incredible story unfold. Have you ever witnessed someone being bullied and felt helpless to step in? Comment number 1. If you've ever seen discrimination happening and wished you had the courage to intervene like Ray and his bikers. Or comment number 2. If you've been fortunate enough to have someone stand up for you when you needed it most. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe in the power of communities coming together against injustice. Now, what do you think happened next when this group of tough bikers decided to take on an entire school system? Let's continue with this remarkable story of courage and see just how far the ripples spread. The atmosphere at Westfield Elementary shifted dramatically on the first day of the Road Warriors escort service. As Jasmine walked through the hallways, the usual taunts were replaced by stunned silence. Students who had participated in her torment now pressed themselves against lockers as she passed, eyes wide with disbelief at the morning's events. Trevor Collins, her primary tormentor, had turned pale when he saw the motorcycles through the classroom window. His usual swagger temporarily abandoned. Even Mrs. Holloway treated Jasmine with newfound, if grudging respect, calling on her in class for the first time in weeks. But the peace was short-lived. By noon, Principal Branson had called an emergency staff meeting. By dismissal time, the school's response was in motion. As Jasmine exited the building that afternoon, she found not only her motorcycle escort waiting, but also 2 police cruisers' lights flashing. Principal Branson stood on the steps, arms crossed, a triumphant expression on his face. "These individuals are creating a disturbance on school property," he informed the officers, loudly ensuring parents collecting their children could hear. "They're intimidating our students and staff. I want them removed and warned not to return." The officer who responded was not what Branson expected. Officer Diana Williams, a black woman in her mid-30s, with a no-nonsense demeanor, surveyed the scene with professional detachment. "Are they on school property?" she asked. "Well, no," Branson admitted. "They're parked on the public street, but their presence is threatening." Officer Williams raised an eyebrow. "Sir, these individuals are on public property. Their vehicles are legally parked, and they're waiting for a student with her father's permission. Unless they've broken a law, there's nothing I can do." Her partner, a younger white officer who seemed uncomfortable with the situation, shifted his weight from foot to foot, but remained silent. "Do you know who these people are?" Branson hissed, lowering his voice. "They're a motorcycle gang. They're dangerous criminals." Ray, who had been observing the exchange while standing beside his bike, approached slowly, hands visible. "Road Warriors Motorcycle Club," he corrected politely. "We're registered as a non-profit organization. We do charity rides for children's hospitals. We're all employed tax-paying citizens. I'm Ray Jackson, former Marine Corps, honorably discharged after 3 tours in Afghanistan. You're welcome to check our records, officer." He handed Officer Williams a business card with the club's information. "We're simply ensuring young Miss Taylor gets safely to and from school without being subjected to racial harassment." Branson's face reddened. "That's preposterous. There is no harassment at my school." Ray removed his phone from his pocket. "We've documented 17 separate incidents in the past 3 days alone, including this one from this morning." He showed Officer Williams a video clearly depicting Trevor Collins and 2 other boys following Jasmine in the hallway, making ape noises and gestures when they thought no adults were watching. The video had obviously been taken by Jasmine using her father's phone. Officer Williams's expression hardened as she watched. "Mr. Branson, I think we need to have a conversation about this." The principal's defeat was temporary. By the next morning, the school board had called an emergency meeting to address the motorcycle gang intimidation situation at Westfield Elementary. Marcus Taylor received a formal letter requesting his presence. The meeting was scheduled for 7:30 in the evening, making it impossible for him to attend without missing his hospital shift, a fact the board was undoubtedly aware of. Ray solved the problem simply. "I'll go as Jasmine's advocate," he said, "and I won't be alone." The school board meeting was standing room only, with concerned parents packing the space. Marcus had managed to trade shifts with a colleague standing nervously at the back beside Ray and 3 other Road Warriors members. At the front, Superintendent Phillips and Principal Branson sat with the 7-member board, all white men and women from Westfield's wealthiest neighborhoods. Trevor Collins's father, Richard, was among them, his expression thunderous as he noticed the bikers in the room. The meeting began with Principal Branson presenting what he called a disturbing development threatening our school's safety. He described the motorcycle club in ominous terms, suggesting they had targeted the school for unknown but certainly nefarious purposes. When he finished his dramatic presentation, Board President William Harrington, a silver-haired man with the polished appearance of old money, called for public comments. Ray was the first to the microphone. Dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt rather than his leather vest, he presented a surprisingly professional appearance, though his facial scar and massive build still marked him as an intimidating figure. "My name is Raymond Jackson," he began. "I'm president of the Road Warriors Motorcycle Club. I'm also a former Marine, a small business owner, and a taxpayer in this community." He paused, surveying the room. "We became involved with the Taylor family after 7-year-old Jasmine Taylor sought our help. She came to our clubhouse alone, terrified, and bearing the bruises of ongoing racial harassment at Westfield Elementary." A murmur ran through the crowd. Ray held up a tablet. "I have here documented evidence of 26 incidents of racial harassment directed at Jasmine in the past week alone. I have videos, photographs, and witness statements. I have recordings of racial slurs being used against her. I have documentation of destroyed schoolwork, physical intimidation, and deliberate exclusion." His voice remained steady, but his eyes blazed as he looked directly at Principal Branson. "I also have evidence that these incidents were reported to school staff who took no action. In fact, I have evidence that the administration blamed the victim for these attacks. Richard Collins surged to his feet. This is slander. My son would never engage in such behavior. This thug is trying to intimidate our community with false accusations. Ray didn't flinch. Your son, Mr. Collins, is captured on video calling a 7-year-old girl a racial slur so vile I won't repeat it here. He's also shown orchestrating other students in the physical harassment of Jasmine. If you'd like to view this evidence, I'd be happy to share it with you and the rest of the board. The room erupted into chaos, with parents shouting questions and board members trying to restore order. When the noise finally subsided, Superintendent Phillips stood, her expression icy. While these allegations are concerning if true, the fact remains that having motorcycle gang members around our elementary school creates an unacceptable safety risk. We cannot allow it to continue. And what about Jasmine's safety? Marcus Taylor's voice rang out from the back of the room. All heads turned as he stepped forward. My daughter has been terrorized for months while this administration did nothing. She's been physically assaulted, verbally abused, and psychologically traumatized. Where was your concern for safety then? As the meeting continued, it became clear that the board was divided. Some members appeared genuinely troubled by the evidence Ray presented, while others, including Richard Collins, were unmoved, focused solely on removing the bikers from school property. The meeting ended with an uneasy compromise. The board would investigate the allegations of racial harassment, but the road warriors were to remain off school grounds entirely. You can park a block away, Harrington declared, but no motorcycles within sight of the school. Ray accepted these terms with a polite nod that didn't reach his eyes. Outside the meeting, a reporter from the local weekly newspaper approached them. Kelly Martinez, she introduced herself, Westfield Gazette. I'd like to hear more about what's happening at the elementary school. The following day's headline sent shockwaves through the community. Racial harassment allegations rock. Westfield Elementary Motorcycle Club steps in when school officials won't act. The article included quotes from Ray Marcus and, most powerfully, Jasmine herself. I just want to go to school and learn without being scared, she had told the reporter. The community reaction was immediate and polarized. Several families contacted Marcus Taylor, sharing similar experiences with discrimination in the district. Others rallied around the administration, insisting that Westfield had no race problem and that the allegations were exaggerated or fabricated. The most influential families in town, including major donors to the school, publicly expressed their concern about the exaggerated claims damaging the town's reputation. The pressure extended beyond the school. Marcus arrived at work to find his supervisor waiting with a troubled expression. There's been some concern expressed about your recent activities, the man said uncomfortably. Several board members have mentioned that your public allegations against Westfield Elementary are reflecting poorly on the hospital. I'm defending my daughter, Marcus, replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. Are you saying my job is at risk because of that? The supervisor wouldn't meet his eyes. I'm just suggesting you might want to handle this more privately. That evening, Marcus and Jasmine returned home to find their front yard vandalized. Crude racial slurs had been spray-painted across their garage door, their mailbox had been smashed, and several windows were broken. Most disturbing was the note nailed to their front door, "Leave Westfield or else." Officer Diana Williams responded to their call, her face grim, as she documented the damage. We'll increase patrols in your neighborhood, she promised, and I'll make sure this is investigated properly, not swept under the rug. But both she and Marcus knew the reality. In a town where money and connections ruled, justice was rarely served to those without either. As Williams was leaving, the rumble of motorcycles filled the street. The road warriors arrived en masse, more members than Marcus had seen before. We heard what happened, Ray said simply. We're setting up a watch rotation. 2 members outside your house at all times, day and night. His expression made it clear this wasn't a suggestion open for debate. These people want to intimidate you into leaving just like the other minority families before you. We're not going to let that happen. As Jasmine watched from the window, the bikers began cleaning up the vandalism, scrubbing away hateful words, boarding up broken windows, and replacing the destroyed mailbox. In the gathering darkness, their leather jackets gleamed under the streetlights, powerful figures standing guard against a threat that had previously been faceless, but was now emerging from the shadows, revealing the ugly truth beneath. Westfield's pristine facade. The Road Warriors' protection of the Taylor family expanded rapidly in response to the escalating threats. Club members with construction backgrounds reinforced the Taylor home with security cameras, motion sensor lights, and stronger locks. A rotation schedule ensured that 2 bikers were always stationed outside their presence, a visible deterrent against further vandalism or intimidation. Ray, drawing on his military experience, established clear protocols for escorts and surveillance. Jasmine was never alone, accompanied to school during transitions between classes and back home by various members of the club. Even during bathroom breaks, Tanya Sparks-Williams waited just outside. The constant protection created a bubble of safety around Jasmine, but it couldn't shield her from the social isolation that followed. Many parents concerned about the controversy instructed their children to avoid the troubled girl with the biker gang. Teachers, taking cues from the administration, maintained a cool professionalism toward her, neither encouraging nor preventing the ostracism. Meanwhile, Ray was conducting his own investigation into Westfield's history of discrimination. Using contacts from his days as a security consultant after leaving the Marines, he began piecing together a disturbing pattern. The Taylor family isn't the first, he explained to the club members gathered in their clubhouse one evening. I've identified 8 minority families who moved to Westfield in the past 5 years. 7 have left under mysterious circumstances. He pinned photographs on a bulletin board, creating a timeline of arrivals and departures. Each family experienced escalating harassment. Each made formal complaints to the school or town officials. Each suddenly withdrew those complaints and moved away within months. Victor Hammer Rodriguez studied the board. Buyouts. Threats. Both, I think, Ray replied. I managed to contact 2 of the families. Neither would speak openly, citing confidentiality agreements. But reading between the lines, they were essentially paid to go away and stay quiet. When money didn't work, he pointed to police reports he'd obtained showing vandalism similar to what the Taylors had experienced. The club's investigation gained an unexpected ally when Kelly Martinez from the Westfield Gazette approached Ray after a particularly tense school board meeting. I've been looking into Westfield's demographics, she said, showing him spreadsheets on her laptop. Despite being only 20 miles from diverse urban centers, this town has maintained a 97% white population for decades. That's statistically impossible without some form of systematic exclusion. The journalist's resources, combined with the Road Warriors' growing network of informants and allies, began revealing a troubling conspiracy at the heart of Westfield, a coordinated effort by wealthy residents, school administrators, and town officials to maintain the community's traditional character by driving out minority families. They call it preserving property values and maintaining educational standards, Kelly explained. But it's old-fashioned racism dressed up in respectable language. As Ray dug deeper, more minority residents of Westfield began coming forward cautiously at first, then with increasing courage. They gathered in the back room of a restaurant owned by one of the few Hispanic business owners in town, sharing stories of workplace discrimination, housing challenges, and the subtle but pervasive message that they didn't belong. My son was the only Latino kid in his class, confided Elena Morales, whose family had managed to stay in Westfield for 3 years. His teacher suggested he might be happier in a less rigorous reading group, even though he tested above grade level. When we complained, suddenly his grades started dropping. From these meetings emerged a grassroots alliance, the Safe Routes program, inspired by the Road Warriors escorts for Jasmine. Volunteers from Westfield's small minority community and sympathetic white allies began accompanying vulnerable students and families, providing safety in numbers. The motorcycle club members trained these volunteers in observation techniques, proper documentation of incidents, and de-escalation strategies. What began as protection for one child was evolving into a community defense network. Amidst this growing movement, a spark of hope appeared for Jasmine in the form of Lucas Chen, a biracial boy whose mother was Dr. Sarah Lightning Chen. Though a year older than Jasmine, Lucas sought her out during lunch period. "My mom told me what's been happening to you," he said, sitting beside her at her isolated cafeteria table. "It happened to me too when we first moved here. Not as bad, but enough." His friendship was a lifeline for Jasmine, a reminder that she wasn't entirely alone among her peers. Together they created a small sanctuary in the library under mrspossix.com. Washington's protective gaze, sharing books and stories during lunch periods and recesses. For the first time since the harassment began, Jasmine occasionally smiled and laughed, glimpses of her former self emerging from beneath the protective shell she'd built. This tentative happiness enraged her tormentors, particularly Trevor Collins. Thwarted from direct attacks by the constant presence of watchful adults, he and his followers resorted to more subtle forms of harassment, spreading rumors, orchestrating exclusion from group activities, and leaving threatening notes where the bikers wouldn't see. But the Road Warriors and their growing network of allies documented everything, building an extensive record of the ongoing discrimination. Behind the scenes, however, Westfield's power structure was mobilizing against this threat to their control. Richard Collins called a private meeting at his country club estate, inviting Principal Branson, Superintendent Phillips, and several influential parents and board members. The gathering was officially a concerned citizens' discussion about school safety, but its true purpose was far more sinister. "These motorcycle thugs have gone too far," Collins declared to the assembled group. "They're disrupting our community and damaging our reputation. We need to end this now before it gets completely out of hand." What none of them realized was that one of the catering staff serving drinks was the cousin of Tanya Sparks Williams, and every word of their plotting was being carefully memorized to be reported back. The group's strategy was multi-pronged: pressure Marcus Taylor's employer to terminate him, creating financial strain that would force the family to leave; use legal and regulatory harassment against the Road Warriors, finding zoning violations at their clubhouse or traffic infractions during their escorts; and most disturbingly, create a narrative that Ray Jackson was showing inappropriate interest in Jasmine. "We plant the suggestion of impropriety," suggested one parent, a marketing executive. "Once that kind of accusation is made, it doesn't matter if it's proven. The cloud of suspicion never fully disappears." The following morning, an anonymous call was made to Child Protective Services, alleging that Marcus Taylor was allowing his daughter to associate with dangerous criminals and raising concerns about her relationship with Ray Jackson. That same day, police officers appeared at the Road Warriors clubhouse with a warrant to search for illegal weapons and drugs based on an anonymous tip. Though they found nothing illegal, the message was clear: the power structure was fighting back. The crushing blow came 3 days later. Ray was escorting Jasmine home when police cruisers surrounded them. Officer Diana Williams wasn't among them. Instead, grim-faced officers informed Ray that he was under arrest for interference with custody of a minor and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, charges obviously manufactured but serious enough to force his immediate removal. As he was handcuffed, Ray looked at the terrified Jasmine. "Call your father," he said calmly. "Then call Sarah Chen. Everything will be okay." But as the police car drove away with Ray in the back seat, the other Road Warriors watching helplessly from a legal distance, everyone knew this was a devastating setback. The message from Westfield's elite was unmistakable. They would use every lever of power to maintain their system, regardless of who was hurt in the process. The morning after Ray's arrest, Jasmine stood at the edge of her driveway, school backpack hanging limply from one hand. Without the Road Warriors' escort, the walk to Westfield Elementary loomed before her like a journey into enemy territory. Marcus stood beside her, his hospital scrubs already on for his early shift. "I can call in sick," he offered for the third time. "Stay home with you today." Jasmine shook her head. "You can't miss work again. They're already angry with you." Her voice was small but determined. "Sarah said she'd pick me up after her night shift, but she's running late. I should just go." The worry lines deepening around Marcus's eyes made him look years older than his 34 years. "I'll walk you part way, then run to catch my bus," he decided. Their journey was tense, both scanning the streets for threats. When they reached the halfway point where Marcus needed to turn toward the bus stop, he knelt to hug Jasmine tightly. "Keep your phone on. Call me immediately, if anything happens. I love you so much, Jazzy." "Love you too, Dad," she whispered, watching him jog toward the bus stop before continuing alone toward school. The atmosphere inside Westfield Elementary had transformed overnight. News of Ray's arrest had spread through parent text chains and social media framed as biker gang leader arrested for crimes involving local child. Without the protective presence of the road warriors, the balance of power had instantly shifted back. As Jasmine walked the gauntlet of hallways, she felt the change immediately. Whispers followed her, punctuated by sneers and triumphant glances from Trevor Collins and his friends. Mrs. Holloway seemed to look through her as if she didn't exist. Even Mrs. Washington in the library could only offer a sympathetic glance, her protection limited by her own vulnerable position as one of the few black staff members. The attack came during afternoon recess. Jasmine had tried to remain in the classroom, but the substitute teacher insisted all children go outside. She positioned herself near the recess monitor, hoping proximity to an adult would provide some safety. She didn't notice Trevor and 5 other students slipping away toward the equipment shed, nor did she see them emerge with a plan and a pair of scissors taken from the art supplies. The recess monitor's phone rang, and she stepped away to answer it, a call later discovered to have been placed by a parent involved in the conspiracy. In that brief window of adult inattention, Trevor's group surrounded Jasmine, herding her toward a blind spot behind the playground equipment. "No bikers to protect you now," Trevor taunted, his face twisted with hate. "Time to learn your place." What happened next was documented in horrifying detail, because one of Trevor's accomplices, eager to impress, the older boy recorded it on a phone stolen from his older sibling. The video later showed Jasmine backed against the wall, surrounded by jeering children as Trevor produced the scissors. "Those braids make you look like a freak," he said. "Let's fix them." Despite her struggles and pleas, 2 larger boys held her arms, while Trevor hacked at her hair, cutting off the braids she'd grown for years, braids Marcus had carefully maintained for her each morning since her mother's death. The scissors came perilously close to her scalp and ears several times, leaving small nicks that beaded with blood. Throughout the assault, the children chanted racial slurs, their young voices making the hatred even more shocking. When they finally released her, Jasmine slumped to the ground, surrounded by the severed braids. Trevor wasn't finished. Directing his cameraman, he forced Jasmine to look up at the phone. "Say it," he demanded. "Say you don't belong here." When she remained silent, tears streaming down her face, one of the boys kicked her ribs. "Say it, or we'll do worse tomorrow." "I don't belong here," she finally whispered, the words captured clearly on the recording. Satisfied, the group ran off, leaving her curled around her pain. The video appeared online within hours, posted to a private social media group for Westfield students. It quickly spread with added racist comments and emoji. No adult intervened, even when Jasmine returned to class with bloodied ears and crudely chopped hair. Mrs. Holloway glanced at her and continued teaching, as if nothing was amiss. By dismissal time, Jasmine was feverish with shock and emotional trauma. She stumbled out of the school to find not Sarah Chen but her son Lucas waiting anxiously. "Mom got held up at the hospital," he explained, taking her hand. "She sent me to walk you to our house. She'll be home." His voice trailed off as he saw her face and ruined hair. "What happened to you?" The question broke something inside her. Jasmine collapsed on the school steps, body shaking with sobs too intense for sound. Lucas, panicking, called his mother. Within 20 minutes, Sarah Chen's car screeched to a stop in front of the school, still wearing surgical scrubs from her hospital shift. The ER doctor took one look at Jasmine and went into medical mode, checking her physical injuries while guiding her gently to the car. "Lucas, call Mr. Taylor immediately," she instructed her son. "Tell him Jasmine is safe with us but needs medical attention. I'm taking her to the hospital now." At Memorial Hospital, Marcus rushed to the emergency room, still in his nursing scrubs, face ashen with fear. The attending physician, a colleague of Sarah's, had already documented Jasmine's injuries, multiple small lacerations to her scalp and ears, bruised ribs, and symptoms of acute psychological trauma. Police had been called, with Officer Diana Williams responding personally to take the report. When Marcus was finally allowed into the examination room, he found his daughter sedated, her breathing shallow eyes, vacant even when open. "The physical injuries will heal," the doctor told him quietly. "But the psychological trauma. She's experienced a severe panic attack on top of the assault. She'll need specialized care." Outside in the hallway, Sarah Chen showed Marcus and Officer Williams the video which had been forwarded to her by a horrified parent whose child had received it. "This was a coordinated attack," Williams said grimly, taking the phone as evidence, "and the school did nothing even after she returned to class, obviously injured." Marcus leaned against the wall legs, barely supporting him. "I can't send her back there," he whispered. "But I can't afford to quit my job to homeschool her. I can't move right now. We're underwater on the mortgage after only 6 months." His voice cracked. "They're going to win, aren't they? This is exactly what they want." Officer Williams placed a hand on his shoulder. "Not if I can help it." While Jasmine remained hospitalized, Marcus returned home to find a letter waiting for him. The hospital administration had reviewed his employment status and determined that his recent actions have created an untenable situation. Though carefully worded to avoid any direct reference to discrimination, the message was clear: he was terminated effective immediately. The official reason cited was violation of social media policy, a reference to his single Facebook post supporting the Road Warriors' efforts to protect his daughter. The final blow came the following morning: an eviction notice posted on their door. The property management company, owned by a business partner of Richard Collins, claimed they had received multiple complaints about disturbances at the residence. The Taylors had 30 days to vacate. As Marcus sat at his kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills, termination papers, and eviction notices, he faced the crushing realization that Westfield's power structure had orchestrated their destruction with terrifying efficiency. With Ray in jail, the Road Warriors under legal pressure, and his own resources dwindling, the path forward seemed impossible dark. What do you think the Road Warriors should do next to help Jasmine and her father? Comment number 1 if you believe they should gather more evidence and take legal action against the school and town officials. Or comment number 2 if you think they should organize an even larger protest to bring national attention to what's happening in Westfield. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about communities standing up against injustice. The question remains, when faced with such overwhelming opposition from those in power, can a group of determined individuals really make a difference? Let's continue with this powerful story and find out. Jasmine spent 3 days in the pediatric ward of Memorial Hospital, her physical wounds treated, while therapists gently began addressing the deeper psychological trauma. On the second day, an unexpected visitor arrived carrying a small stuffed teddy bear. Dr. James Richardson, chief of surgery, and father of Lucas's friend Tyler, stood uncomfortably in the doorway of her room. "May I come in?" he asked Marcus, who had been sleeping in a chair beside Jasmine's bed. Marcus nodded, warily recognizing Richardson as a member of Westfield's elite social circle. "My son Tyler showed me the video," Richardson said quietly, placing the teddy bear beside Jasmine's pillow. "He received it in a group chat. He came to us in tears, horrified by what his classmates had done." The distinguished surgeon's face was lined with genuine distress. "I want you to know that not everyone in Westfield supports what's happening. My wife and we're ashamed of our community right now." This visit marked the first crack in the united front of Westfield's powerful families. The Richardsons were old money, their name adorning the hospital's main wing. Their public support shifted the dynamics considerably. By that afternoon, 3 other influential families had reached out to Marcus, offering help with legal representation and temporary housing when they were forced to leave their home. While Jasmine was hospitalized, Officer Diana Williams was conducting her own investigation. Despite pressure from her superiors to handle the matter discreetly, she meticulously documented the assault, interviewed witnesses, and most importantly, tracked the online spread of the video. "This wasn't just bullying," she explained to her captain. "This was a hate crime committed against a 7-year-old child, and there's evidence of adult involvement in orchestrating the attack." When the captain suggested she consider the community implications of pursuing charges against children from prominent families, Williams stood her ground. "I'm considering the implications of not pursuing justice," she replied. "I've requested that the State Police Hate Crimes Unit review the case." Her formal reopening of the investigation sent shockwaves through Westfield's administration. Meanwhile, the video that Trevor and his friends had created as a trophy of their cruelty became the catalyst for their downfall. Kelly Martinez received an anonymous copy and made the difficult journalistic decision to publish a carefully edited version in the Westfield Gazette with Jasmine's face blurred, but the attackers clearly identifiable. Horrifying assault at Westfield Elementary. 7-year-old victim targeted in racist attack, screamed the headline. The story included a timeline of the harassment Jasmine had endured, the school's failure to intervene, and the suspicious arrest of Ray Jackson just before the escalated attack. Kelly's reporting was picked up by regional news outlets, then national ones. Within 48 hours, the hashtag number Justice for Jasmine was trending nationwide, with celebrities and civil rights leaders amplifying the story. As public outrage mounted, the Road Warriors organized their response. Though Ray remained in jail on the fabricated charges, Sarah Lightning Chen had assumed temporary leadership of the club. "We're organizing a solidarity ride," she announced to members and supporters gathered at a local park, their clubhouse still closed by police. "I've reached out to every motorcycle club within 500 miles. We're going to show Westfield and the world that what happens to one child happens to all of our children." The response exceeded even her expectations. On Saturday morning, over 700 motorcycles thundered into Westfield from all directions. Bikers of all races, genders, and backgrounds united in purpose. They gathered in the park across from town hall engines, creating a deafening roar that could be heard throughout the community. Local police, overwhelmed by the numbers, could only direct traffic and watch as speakers set up a podium and sound system. The rally was peaceful but powerful, with bikers sharing stories of their own experiences with discrimination and pledging support for the Taylor family. Television news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the massive gathering to a national audience. That same day, Ray Jackson was unexpectedly released from jail. The witness whose testimony had been the basis for his arrest had recanted, admitting he had been pressured by Richard Collins to make false statements. Ray emerged from the police station to thunderous cheers from the gathered bikers, his expression somber despite the victory. "This isn't about me," he told reporters waiting outside. "This is about a system that allows a child to be terrorized because of her race. This is about accountability." While public attention focused on the dramatic rally, Sarah Chen was pursuing another avenue of justice. Using her hospital connections and the evidence collected by Officer Williams, she had compiled a comprehensive dossier documenting the systematic discrimination in Westfield's school system. This material was presented to state education officials, who announced a formal investigation into the district's practices. Superintendent Phillips and Principal Branson publicly denied all allegations, issuing a joint statement claiming they were victims of a coordinated smear campaign by outside agitators. But their unified front began crumbling as more families came forward with their own experiences of discrimination. The turning point came at a hastily organized town hall meeting called by the mayor to address the growing crisis. The high school auditorium was filled beyond capacity with news cameras positioned throughout the space. Speakers from both sides presented their perspectives, the tension in the room palpable. Richard Collins spoke passionately about maintaining educational standards and outside troublemakers damaging our community's reputation. Marcus Taylor described his daughter's ordeal in measured tones that made the horror all the more powerful. But it was Jasmine herself who transformed the meeting. Small and fragile in a new dress purchased by Sarah Chen, her crudely cut hair covered by a colorful head wrap, she approached the microphone when the moderator called her name. The room fell silent as she stood on tiptoes to reach the microphone. "My name is Jasmine Taylor," she began, her voice barely audible at first. "I'm 7 years old. I like science and math. I want to be a doctor someday." She paused, gathering courage. "Since I came to Westfield, I've been called names I don't want to repeat. I've been pushed down. I've had my things stolen and broken. I was locked in a closet for hours. And last week some kids held me down and cut off my hair while saying I should go back to Africa even though I was born in Hartford. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. Every time something happened, I told a teacher or the principal. They always said it was my fault, or that I was making it up, or that I needed to try harder to fit in. The simplicity and clarity of her testimony held the room spellbound. I don't understand why the color of my skin makes people hate me. I don't understand why grown-ups who are supposed to protect children didn't protect me. Tears streamed down her face, but her voice remained steady. All I wanted was to go to school and learn and make friends. That's all I wanted. As she returned to her seat, the auditorium remained in stunned silence. Then from the back, someone began to applaud. The sound spread, building to a thunderous ovation that continued for several minutes. Even some of Collins's supporters were wiping away tears, the human reality of what had been allowed to happen, finally breaking through the abstract arguments about community standards and outside agitators. In that moment, the tide turned decisively. A child's truth spoken plainly had accomplished what all the protests and investigations could not. It had made the invisible visible, forcing the community to confront what had been happening in their name. The morning after the town hall meeting, Jasmine's testimony dominated local and regional headlines. Photos of the small girl at the microphone became symbolic of the larger struggle against institutional racism in seemingly progressive communities. Despite this growing public support, the opposition's counterattack was swift and calculated. The very afternoon following the town hall, Marcus received a call from his former supervisor at Memorial Hospital. "There's been a reconsideration of your situation," the man said, his tone carefully neutral. "The administration is willing to reinstate you effective immediately with no break in your benefits or seniority." Before Marcus could respond with gratitude, the supervisor continued, his voice dropping. "There are conditions, however. The hospital would need written assurance that you'll discontinue your public commentary about Westfield schools. All pending legal actions would need to be withdrawn, and your association with the motorcycle club would have to end." The message was clear: surrender your fight for justice, accept the status quo, and you can have your livelihood back. Marcus's hand tightened on the phone. "I'll need to think about it," he replied, knowing that accepting these terms would betray everything his daughter had suffered for. Similar pressure was being applied throughout the community. Families who had spoken in support of the Taylors at the town hall reported subtle and not-so-subtle consequences. Business contracts mysteriously canceled social invitations, withdrawn children suddenly excluded from activities. The Richardsons, who had visited Jasmine in the hospital, discovered their annual donation to the Westfield Country Club's charity foundation had been respectfully declined. The resistance against change had deep roots and considerable resources. The most shocking blow came in the pre-dawn hours 2 days after the rally. The Road Warriors clubhouse, which had been released from police lockdown the previous day, erupted in flames visible throughout the town. By the time firefighters controlled the blaze, the building was destroyed. Fire investigators quickly identified multiple points of origin, confirming arson, though they were careful to note there was no evidence yet linking the fire to recent controversies. As the Road Warriors surveyed the smoking ruins of their headquarters, Ray gathered the members. "They think burning our clubhouse will break us," he said, his voice carrying to the news cameras that had gathered at a distance. "They think we'll give up and go away." He placed his hand on the charred remains of the entrance sign. "This building was just wood and concrete. What we stand for cannot be burned down." The club immediately relocated their operations to Hammer's auto repair shop, converting the break room into a command center for their expanding campaign. Maps of Westfield covered the walls, tracking incidents of harassment, documenting allies and opponents, and coordinating their growing network of supporters. The community battle lines grew more defined with the formation of a new organization. Traditional Values of Westfield, headed by Richard Collins and other prominent community members. Their stated mission was to preserve the educational excellence and community standards that make Westfield's special language that thinly veiled their opposition to integration efforts. They scheduled their own rally, hired a public relations firm, and began a sophisticated media campaign framing the controversy as outside agitators exploiting an unfortunate schoolyard incident. Superintendent Phillips seized this moment to announce a new district initiative. After careful evaluation of Jasmine Taylor's educational needs, she stated in a press release, "We've determined that her behavioral and emotional issues would be better addressed in our district's specialized learning center." This specialized learning center, located in a separate facility across town, was where students with serious behavioral problems or learning disabilities were sent, often as a precursor to being pushed out of the district entirely. The transfer, scheduled to take effect immediately, would effectively isolate Jasmine from witnesses to her harassment and remove her from public view. Marcus was furious when he received the transfer order. "They're trying to bury the evidence," he told Ray during an emergency meeting at Hammer's shop. "If Jasmine is labeled as having behavioral problems and hidden away, they can control the narrative completely." The legal team, assembled by the Road Warriors, agreed. "This is retaliation, pure and simple," said Maria Vasquez, a civil rights attorney who had volunteered her services. "But fighting it through official channels will take time that Jasmine doesn't have. Each day in that environment does more damage." The solution came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Washington, the school librarian who had provided Jasmine's sanctuary, contacted Ray through a secure channel. "They're shredding documents," she whispered, fear evident in her voice. "Administrative assistants have been instructed to clean up any records related to discrimination complaints. Old incident reports, parent complaints, transfer requests, they're all disappearing." The elderly librarian had worked at Westfield Elementary for 27 years and knew where all the metaphorical bodies were buried. "I've been keeping my own records," she continued. "Copies of every complaint that crossed my desk. Names, dates, patterns. I didn't know what to do with them until now." That night, in a scene reminiscent of a spy movie, Ray and Officer Williams met Mrs. Washington in the deserted parking lot of a neighboring town's grocery store. The librarian handed over 3 thick binders of meticulously organized documentation spanning more than 15 years, evidence that would prove the systematic nature of Westfield's discrimination. "Be careful with these," she warned. "When they discover they're missing, they'll know it was me." Officer Williams assured her of protection, but all 3 recognized the risk the woman was taking. Her courage would cost her a job she had held for nearly 3 decades. The documents proved explosive, especially when combined with an anonymous delivery Kelly Martinez received the following day. A USB drive containing internal emails between Superintendent Phillips, Principal Branson, and board members discussing how to manage the minority situation and maintain Westfield's traditional demographic balance. Many emails specifically mentioned strategies to pressure Black and Hispanic families to leave the district. With this evidence in hand, Ray organized a comprehensive legal response. Civil rights attorneys from across the state volunteered their services, filing emergency injunctions to prevent Jasmine's transfer, initiating class action lawsuits on behalf of current and former minority students, and requesting Federal Department of Education and Justice Department investigations. Throughout this intensifying legal battle, Jasmine found her own voice through art. During therapy sessions recommended by her doctors, she began creating powerful drawings depicting her experiences, images that captured both the trauma of harassment and the hope represented by her unexpected allies. One drawing in particular, showing a small Black girl surrounded protectively by diverse motorcyclists facing down shadowy figures in suits, was reproduced in national newspapers and shared widely on social media. The Defenders, as it became known, transformed Jasmine from victim to symbol her experience, representing countless children facing similar discrimination nationwide. As public pressure mounted and legal challenges multiplied, the investigation by Officer Williams uncovered the most damning evidence yet. Through painstaking research into sealed records, she discovered that Principal Branson had been involved in a similar case at his previous school district. A 9-year-old Black student named Michael Robinson had committed suicide after relentless racial bullying that Branson had repeatedly dismissed as normal childhood behavior. The case had been settled quietly, records sealed, and Branson had moved to Westfield shortly afterward, his history carefully concealed. When Williams presented this information to her superiors, she was immediately placed on administrative leave, a transparent attempt to silence her. But it was too late. The connection between Michael Robinson's tragedy and Jasmine Taylor's ordeal was the final piece needed to demonstrate the systematic and deliberate nature of the discrimination at work in Westfield. As news of this discovery spread, the carefully constructed facade of the town's leadership began to crumble entirely. The National Motorcycle Rally for Jasmine Taylor transformed Westfield, Connecticut in ways no one could have predicted. What began with 700 bikers swelled to over 3,000 as clubs from across the country responded to Ray's call. They arrived in waves, their thundering engines announcing their presence long before they appeared on the horizon. The staging area expanded from the town park to encompass several surrounding streets, all closed to regular traffic by overwhelmed local police, who had called in state troopers for assistance. The bikers presented a stunning display of diversity. Black, white, Latino, Asian, Native American, men and women, young and gray-haired. Some in traditional leather, others in professional attire, with their business clothes partially covered by borrowed motorcycle jackets. What united them was the symbol they all wore, a patch depicting Jasmine's drawing of the defenders with the words "Justice rides" beneath it. Major civil rights organizations dispatched representatives, setting up information booths and legal aid stations. National news networks broadcast live from the rally, interviewing participants and covering speeches from a hastily constructed stage. Celebrities tweeted, support politicians issued statements, and online donations poured into the newly established Jasmine Taylor Educational Trust. The atmosphere was determined but disciplined. Ray and other club leaders had established strict rules against any behavior that could be portrayed as threatening or disruptive. "We're here to support a child and expose injustice," he reminded participants. "Our power is in our numbers and our message, not in intimidation." Even as the rally captured public attention, the legal and administrative gears were turning behind the scenes. The evidence compiled by Officer Williams Mrs. Washington and Kelly Martinez had made its way to federal authorities. 2 days into the rally, the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights announced a formal investigation into Westfield School District for systematic discrimination. Hours later, the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division revealed they were reviewing the case for possible federal civil rights violations. The morning of the third day brought breaking news that electrified the gathered crowds. The Westfield School Board had called an emergency meeting and voted 4-3 to place Principal Branson and Superintendent Phillips on administrative leave, pending the outcome of multiple investigations. The board's statement, clearly crafted by attorneys concerned about liability, cited recently revealed information requiring thorough review and announced the appointment of interim leadership from outside the district. That same afternoon, Officer Diana Williams was not only reinstated, but promoted to lead a newly created Community Relations Division within the Westfield Police Department. Her first official act was to announce the formation of a special task force to investigate the arson at the Road Warriors Clubhouse and the organized harassment of minority residents. The momentum for change accelerated rapidly. Richard Collins and 2 other board members submitted their resignations, citing personal reasons but clearly recognizing their untenable positions as evidence of their involvement in systematic discrimination became public. The traditional values of Westfield Group quietly disbanded their scheduled rally, canceled without explanation. At the hospital, the administration that had fired Marcus issued a public apology and offered him not just reinstatement, but a promotion to department supervisor with a substantial raise. He accepted the position, but negotiated a delayed start date, explaining that his primary focus remained his daughter's well-being. The most unexpected development came from an anonymous donor who purchased a foreclosed commercial property on Main Street and donated it to the Road Warriors for their new clubhouse. Only when the paperwork was finalized did the donor's identity emerge. Dr. James Richardson, Chief of Surgery and father of Tyler. "My family has been in Westfield for 5 generations," he explained to Ray. I've been complicit through my silence in allowing this community to remain exclusionary. This is a small step toward changing that legacy. The new building, 3 times the size of their previous clubhouse, allowed the Road Warriors to expand their mission. Under Ray's leadership, they established the Aaliyah Jackson Community Center, named for his daughter who had taken her own life after similar racist harassment. The center would provide after-school programs, tutoring community events, and a safe space for children of all backgrounds. When Marcus's 30-day eviction notice expired, he and Jasmine had somewhere to go. Sarah Chen's medical colleagues had secured him a position at a prestigious medical center in a neighboring town with a significantly more diverse population. The Road Warriors organized a moving brigade, transporting their belongings to a comfortable apartment close to both Marcus's new workplace and a well-regarded school known for its inclusive environment. The morning of Jasmine's first day at her new school featured a ceremonial motorcycle escort, but this time with a difference. Instead of being a necessary protection against harassment, it was a celebration. Dozens of bikes accompanied her riders from diverse backgrounds, showing support for her courage in standing up against injustice. Back in Westfield, the transformation continued. The interim administration implemented comprehensive anti-bullying and diversity training for all staff. Trevor Collins and the students directly involved in Jasmine's assault faced serious consequences, including mandatory counseling and community service under the supervision of juvenile authorities. Their parents, including Richard Collins, were required to participate in restorative justice sessions. 1 year after the events that had begun with a terrified 7-year-old seeking help from unlikely allies, Jasmine returned to Westfield not as a student but as a speaker. The school district, under entirely new leadership committed to meaningful change, had invited her to address the first meeting of a diverse student council that included representatives from every grade level and background. The auditorium was filled to capacity with Road Warriors members, sitting alongside teachers, parents, and community leaders who had once been adversaries but were now cautiously working toward a shared vision of justice and inclusion. Jasmine, now 8 years old and flourishing in her new environment, stood confidently at the podium. Her hair had grown back, now styled in elaborate braids decorated with colorful beads that clicked softly as she moved. "A year ago, I didn't think I belonged anywhere," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I thought being different meant being alone. I was wrong." She looked around the room, making eye contact with Ray and the other bikers who had transformed from strangers to family. "What happened to me was wrong, but something good came from it. We showed that when people stand together against injustice, they can change things that seem impossible to change." She spoke about courage, not the absence of fear, but the determination to act despite it. She spoke about justice, not as an abstract concept, but as the daily work of treating every person with dignity and respect. And she spoke about community, not defined by wealth or race or tradition, but by the willingness to protect each other's humanity. "Sometimes heroes don't look like what you expect," she concluded, smiling at the leather-clad bikers in the audience. "Sometimes the most important thing you can do is believe someone when they tell you they're hurting, even when it would be easier not to listen. That's what the Road Warriors did for me, and now we're all doing it for each other." As she finished speaking, the first to rise for the standing ovation was Ray Jackson. The former Marine's scarred face shone with tears as he applauded the child who had helped him find meaning in his own daughter's tragedy. Beside him stood Marcus Taylor, no longer a man standing alone against overwhelming forces, but part of a community transformed by courage and determination. The Road Warriors Motorcycle Club had come to Westfield to protect a single child. They had remained to build something much larger, a model for communities across the nation grappling with the persistent realities of racism and exclusion. The ride for justice had begun with one small girl's desperate plea for help. It would continue long after her story faded from headlines carried forward by ordinary people who had discovered their extraordinary power to create change. What do you think is the most powerful message from Jasmine's story? Was it the courage of a child speaking truth to power, or the unexpected alliance that formed to protect her? Comment your thoughts below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear that standing up against injustice is always worth the fight. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of the most inspiring true stories of courage and community in the face of discrimination. Remember, sometimes the heroes we need don't look like what we expect, but they show up exactly when they're needed most. Jasmine's story teaches us profound lessons about courage, community, and change. True courage isn't about being fearless, but taking action despite overwhelming fear. This 7-year-old girl showed more bravery approaching strangers for help than many adults show in a lifetime. She reminds us that speaking truth to power, however small your voice might seem, can catalyze transformation. The unlikely alliance between a black child and bikers demonstrates that help often comes from unexpected places. Prejudging people by appearance or lifestyle might cause us to miss our strongest allies. Ray and his club showed that community isn't defined by similar backgrounds, but by shared values and willingness to stand for justice. The story also exposes how systems maintain inequality through silence, intimidation, and institutional power. Racism thrives when good people remain quiet. Only when evidence became undeniable and public pressure mounted did meaningful change occur. Perhaps most importantly, Jasmine's journey shows that fighting injustice isn't just about opposing wrong, it's about creating something better. The Road Warriors didn't just protect one child. They built a community center, established support networks, and transformed an entire town's approach to inclusion. When we witness discrimination, we face a choice: remain comfortable bystanders or become uncomfortable defenders. True justice requires ordinary people making the extraordinary decision that some principles are worth fighting for regardless of personal cost. What moment in Jasmine's story resonated most deeply with you? Was it her incredible bravery in seeking help, Ray's determination to prevent another tragedy like his daughter's, or the community's eventual transformation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever witnessed discrimination and had to make the difficult choice to stand up or stay silent? Your experiences might help others find their courage. If this story moved you or reminded you that standing against injustice matters, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful stories of courage and community in action. These aren't just stories, they're blueprints for how we can all make a difference. Share this video with someone who needs reminding that they're not alone in their fight for justice, or with someone who might need to recognize their power to help others. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage, unlikely friendships, and the transformative power of standing together. Remember, in a world where you can be anything, be someone's Ray Jackson, the person who shows up when everyone else walks away.